سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم صدق الله العظيم.
If we had sent down this Quran upon a mountain, you would have seen it humbled and coming apart from fear of Allah. And these examples we present to the people that perhaps they will give thought. He is Allah, other than whom there is no deity, knower of the unseen and the witness. He is the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. He is Allah, other than whom there is no deity, the sovereign, the pure, the perfection, the bestower of faith, the overseer, the exalted in might, the compeller, the superior. Exalted is Allah above whatever they associate with him. He is Allah, the creator, the inventor, the fashioner. To him belong the best names. Whatever is in the heavens and earth is exalting him, and he is exalted in might, the wise.
السلام عليكم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah, we're here today for our wonderful event, The Image of Islam, and we've been blessed to have two fantastic and versatile speakers with us who have joined us today in order to help present this wonderful idea that we have here. So one of them is someone I'm very proud to be able to call my teacher, and the other person is a prominent member of the biggest Muslim civil rights organization in the United States. And our goal today is really to challenge the current image of Islam and the factors and the misconceptions that form it. And inshallah, we're going to take you on a journey to get to that place tonight, inshallah. But first, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the people who did help make this event possible, and that's the MSA cabinet. MashaAllah, they've done great work. There's been so many events this year, and they really deserve all your appreciation for all their time and effort that they put in. We have Daniel Malik and Akhlia Ahsan as the vice president. Sister Tasneem Abu Khadir is the treasurer, and Humaira Haq is the secretary. The events coordinators are Hasib Khan and Khalid Muqi. And we have Chad McDonough and Zohar Noor, who are the publicity directors. In addition, they also have Saad Abbasi and Hiba Malik, who are the freshman reps. And of course, we have Brother Ahmed Mahmoud, who is the MSA president, who's done a fantastic job, mashallah. And without further ado, I'd like to invite him up real quick.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It is nice to see this turnout despite the nippy weather. Basically, welcome everyone to the Image of Islam. Plenty of people have been asking, what exactly is the image of Islam that we're talking about? And this is a rather simple question that has a problem of a complex answer. Because the image of Islam is unique to each person based on how they have experienced Islam. They say that an image is worth 1,000 words. So to me, the image of Islam must be a story. It's a narrative that is our own to create. And it's a narrative that must be reclaimed from those who would do it harm. To me, the image of Islam is not just another MSA event, but rather it's another community coming together and adding their voices to the chorus of those who want to set the record straight. We know the script is not for the likes of Fox News to write, but ourselves. We know the beauty of our religion better than anyone else. It is on us now to educate our friends and our community. People deserve to know that when we do takbir during salah, we're not praising the antlers of a mighty moose god. What we're doing is we're showing the world, we're putting the world behind us. We're letting go of all the worldly factors that would affect our salah. When I'm praying salah and I've done my takbir, it means that no longer am I worried about my job, my homework, my plans for the night. It means that this is a time for me to connect with God and God alone. And I believe that we can achieve a future in which the successes, the contributions, and the services of the Muslim community are not blemished by the crimes of those who are thousands of miles away from the place that we call home. We are blessed today to be joined by Imam Mikaeel from the Islamic Society of Annapolis and Zainab Chaudry from the Council of American Islamic Relations. She's been on the scene recently in the Equality for Eid campaign and is all over the place in terms of Muslim civic war. Both are very dynamic individuals, and they'll be conducting their presentations today, and inshallah taking questions during the Q&A session right afterwards. And finally, I'd just like to thank you all again for coming out tonight. Alhamdulillah. We will be serving dinner toward the end, so they'll be passing out some pamphlets for you to fill out. And besides that, I'll let Marcus come back on stage. Okay.
All right, inshallah, before I invite our first speaker up, just wanted to do a quick, simple activity to illustrate a point. So first of all, I'm just going to say a statement, and if it applies to you, or you've been in that situation before, just go ahead and stand up for a second. A sibling or myself have been bullied at school for being Muslim. Good, it's good. 4 people. Alhamdulillah, that's a good thing, because it's not that many. Okay, 5, 6. Okay, so you can sit down. The next thing is that I have been stopped by airport security for random selection. Everybody needs to stand up.
I did so many times.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It is really random, of course. I have felt discriminated against at work or for sisters who've been told they can't wear the hijab because of a uniform policy. I have walked into a store and felt like people did not want to help me because of who I was as a Muslim. That's good. Sometimes I feel that I'm treated differently because of how I look. Yeah, you can raise your hand too, inshallah. I feel bad making you guys stand up every time. I try to avoid praying in public places because I feel uncomfortable. Yeah. Okay, Saad. There's been terrorist jokes directed at me before. No, we're not saying that. Missed the memo. There are times when I feel uncomfortable being out alone because of something I may have heard in the news, for example, when the Boston Marathon bombings occurred or some similar event. Yeah. And the last one, just one I'd like you to stand up and show up. Despite any of the negative feelings / situations previously mentioned, I am proud of my Muslim identity and wouldn't have it any other way. That's what I figured. I mean, if anybody's sitting down, it's like, wow. So, inshallah, with that, it's a good idea to take, good thing to take into this first speaker. And the first speaker tonight for us, inshallah, we're very blessed to be able to have had her come out. She's a very busy person. Sister Zainab Chaudry is the outreach coordinator for the Maryland chapter of the Council of American Islamic Relations, or CARE. They've been in the news recently, and it's also partly because of what she's been working on. And she's been doing a great job, mashallah, working for Equality for Eid. She's the co-chair of the campaign. And she's been featured on several major news networks and on behalf of CARE. And best of all, is an alumni of this very organization, of this very institution. So without further ado, here's Sister Zainab Chaudry.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Harris. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'd like to begin, first of all, by thanking Brother Ahmed and the UMBC MSA for inviting CARE to come participate tonight on this momentous evening, inshallah. Hopefully, it'll be beneficial to all of you. As Brother Harris mentioned, I am the Maryland Outreach Manager for the Council on American Islamic Relations. How many of you in here have heard about CARE? I want to see every hand up in the air. So for those of you who aren't aware of what CARE does, we are the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. So basically, we fight for the rights for Muslim Americans. We make sure that you're not discriminated against or you're not harassed because of your religion. And when I first found out that the topic of tonight's talk was about the image of Islam, it really resonated with me. Both as an American and as a Muslim, like many of you, I struggled throughout my life trying to resonate both the American aspect of my identity and the Muslim aspect of my identity. And one of the reasons why I ended up working with CARE, even though I was a pharmacist by profession, was because I felt that there was a lot of work to be done in shaping an image of Islam that truly resonated with who I was, or who I believed Islam, or what I believed Islam to be. So I was really excited about coming out here and talking to all of you tonight about the image of Islam. And then I asked, how much time do I have to talk about the image of Islam? And then I was told I have 15 to 20 minutes. And then I thought to myself, how do you condense this much information into 15 to 20 minutes? So inshallah, hopefully I'm going to try my best to hit on the key points, and hopefully inshallah they'll be beneficial to all of you. I won't be able to cover all of the material that I want to cover, but I will be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. So first of all, I want to begin by saying that Islam is a beautiful religion. And for anybody in this room whose life has personally been affected by Islam, or who understands and who can relate to a lot of the key aspects of Islam, you can understand the kind of peace and tranquility that it brings into our lives. But like Christianity and Judaism and a lot of the other world religions, there is a difference between the religion itself and the actions of its followers. And a lot of times the two are confused for each other. The action or the inaction of its followers, who are Muslims obviously, predominantly shapes the image of Islam, especially here in the West. And there are so many key factors that play into how that image is shaped and how that image is formed. I'm going to try to highlight some of the key factors in my talk today, inshallah. So one of the problems, as I mentioned, was that culture and religion are often confused. So many of you are probably familiar with recently Bill Maher, the talk show host. Did anybody see the clip where he went on air and he talked about like some gross generalizations about Islam and Muslims? Anybody? I see a few hands. Good. So he recently went on the air, and one of the things that he said was that female genital mutilation is rooted in Islam. So for those of you who don't know what FGM is, it's a very barbaric custom that was practiced in areas of Africa. And he insinuated that it was rooted in Islam and it's something that the religion of Islam condones. And in actuality, if he had done his homework before he went on air and said these kind of gross generalizations, he would have known that FGM is actually a cultural practice that predates Islam. It's actually rooted in different parts of Africa that's practiced in mostly Christian majority African nations, and actually does not have anything to do with the religion of Islam. And another example is how a lot of folks think that Islam oppresses women. And one of the questions that I often get as a practicing Muslim woman who's also in the public eye and who works with the media and with the public pretty regularly is that, wait, you're a woman, you wear hijab, like how are you, in a leadership position in a Muslim organization? And one of the things I really enjoy telling people is that it's not Islam that oppresses women, it's actually the religion of Islam that helped liberate women. And if people were to actually do their research and learn more about the religion of Islam, they would know that it's actually the first religion that granted women-specific rights during a time in our history when women were oppressed. Women were treated like slaves, or worse than slaves actually. They were treated like property. And Islam actually gave women the right to inherit property. It forbade female infanticide. Islam was revealed during a period in our history when it was a very common practice to bury female daughters, female infants. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in the Quran the ayat when the female infant is buried alive and she's asked for what sin was she killed. This is a verse that was intended to forbid and discourage the practice of burying female infants. It also, I could go on and on about how Islam liberates women. It encourages women to keep their last name after they get married so they can maintain their identity, so they're not forced or they don't feel pressured to give up their identity and assume their husband's identity. And no other religion, even to date, encourages that kind of, encourages that. But that's another way how culture and religion are often confused. A lot of folks have asked me, they ask, why is it that in Islam women are not allowed to drive? And I think to myself, I'm like, what would make you think that? And they're like, well, Saudi Arabia is the country in the world where, Mecca and Medina, the two holiest cities that are holiest to Muslims, that's where they're housed. And in Saudi Arabia, women are allowed to drive. And so I tell them, I'm like, where does it say in the Quran that women are not allowed to drive? And they can't answer that question. And they can't answer that question because Islam does not say that women cannot drive. This is something that's specific to that specific country. So there's that disconnect between what Islam mandates and what people actually practice, or Muslims actually practice. One of the other challenges that we face in helping to shape a correct image of Islam is that there's a lot of Islamophobes and right-wing conservatives, especially here in the West, who are really intent on demonizing Islam and vilifying Muslims. So they make it their life's mission to portray Islam in as negative a light as possible. One of the examples I can just give you off the top of my head is, how many of you are aware of the bus ads that were that appeared in not only the DC area, but in New York and in California, East Coast, West Coast? And basically they called Muslims savages. They cherry-picked verses from the Quran and distorted them out of context to make it seem that Islam promoted hatred of Jews, and which it does not. And the person who is behind this is Pamela Geller, who is the head of the American Freedom Defense Initiative. And this is a designated hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And this woman, has made it her life's mission to demonize Islam and vilify Muslims. And even though Kira does work to counteract her rhetoric, and there's a lot of other really good organizations, not just Muslim organizations, but also Jewish, Christian, non-denominational organizations who work to dispel a lot of the rhetoric that she puts out there, it's really difficult to reach everybody who her ads are impacting. And her ads, when people see them on the streets and they see an ad that says, Islam promotes Jew hatred, and then it cherry picks a verse from the Quran, unfortunately people are going to make that correlation that, wow, Islam really is a religion that teaches us to hate people who are like us. So there's a lot of different factors, global factors, that contribute to creating a negative perception of Islam as well. And these include barbaric groups like ISIS and Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. And ISIS particularly has been in the news a lot recently. Especially in the West, the media has really sensationalized their brutal activity that they've been engaged in Iraq and Syria. And unfortunately, when we have groups like this who claim to be Muslim, who call themselves the Islamic State, who have a banner on which they proclaim, or which they show the Shahada, which is a declaration of faith for Muslims, it's one of the key tenets of our faith, then it's very easy to see how people who don't know any better are going to automatically think that, wow, Islam really is a religion that promotes intolerance and is a barbaric religion. But one of the things what Kira's been doing is we've been trying to educate not only Muslims on the fact that ISIS is not an Islamic organization, but also the general public on the fact that ISIS should not be even referred to as the Islamic State. Because not only have they been attacking the Yazidis and the Christian minorities, but they've also been attacking other Muslims and other Muslim minority sects as well. But that's one of the challenges that we've really faced that has made it so difficult for Muslims, especially here in the West, to reclaim that narrative and to reshape that image of Islam as being a religion of peace that we know it to be. There are other domestic factors that also contribute to creating a negative perception of Islam. There was a report that CARE published in 2013. It was called Legislating Fear. And this report was really eye-opening because this report highlighted the fact that creating fear and hatred of Islam and Muslims has become an industry here in the West. And it's a multi-million-dollar industry comprised of a select group of individuals and a select group of organizations who get paid really big bucks to distort Islam and to promote their agendas of demonizing Islam and Muslims and making sure that people see Islam in a negative light. So it's really it's a manufactured industry that promotes fear and hysteria of Islam and Muslims. And then it doesn't help that we also have media outlets like Fox News, for example. Who in here watches Fox News? I don't want to see a single hand. Who in here watches Fox News? Maybe for comedy, I think, maybe once in a while. But if you ever watch Fox News, it's really interesting to see how they display Islam, or how they translate different stories or convey stories that deal with Islam and Muslims. Like there's a lot of bias in their stories, in the way that they portray stories that deal with Islam and Muslims. It really helps to create a very biased, very biased perception of Islam. So media outlets like Fox News, then we have like Hollywood movies, certain Hollywood movies and TV shows that portray Arabs and Muslims specifically in a negative light, that play into some of the tired old stereotypes about, Muslims being, or Arabs being camel jockeys and towel heads and whatnot. A lot of those stereotypes that are perpetuated through a lot of the Hollywood movies and the television shows that we see nowadays. Those also help to contribute to a negative perception of Islam and Muslims. So what do these negative perceptions mean? Unfortunately, they are largely effective in creating hostility and fear towards Muslims. And that translates into, unfortunately, hate crimes and bias attacks, and increased incidents of bullying of Muslim students or students who are perceived to be Muslim. Unfortunately, the Sikh American community, for example, has been victimized to a large degree because a lot of times they're often thought to be Muslim because of the way that they dress, the way they're attired, their skin color. It also results in exclusion of American Muslims from key legislative processes. It results in an increased religious and racial profiling. We all know about the NYPD, how it's been incriminated in conducting widespread unwarranted surveillance of Muslim communities in New York and New Jersey. And it's been really eye-opening, I think, to especially the Muslim communities that live there, to see how simple acts like going to the barber shop to get a haircut, or going to an MSA meeting at your college campus is something that's considered suspicious, that the NYPD or the authorities would consider that it's worth monitoring. It also leads to denial of basic rights such as equal accommodation. And this really plays into the Equality for Eid campaign that some of you may or may not have heard about. Has anybody in here heard about the Equality for Eid campaign in Montgomery County? Okay, I see a few hands. So basically, this is a campaign that was organized by the Council on American Islamic Relations about a year and a half ago. And we were approached by community leaders, Muslim community leaders in Montgomery County, which is the most diverse county in the state, where there's a pretty large population of Muslims that live there. And they've been struggling for almost a decade now to have the Eid holiday be included on the school calendar. And so when they came to us, we talked it over with them. We talked it over with a lot of other key folks in the community to find out how much of a need there was and if there was an interest. And a lot of folks were really interested in having the Eid holiday on the calendar. So then we started mobilizing, and unfortunately the Board of Education in that county has been very resistant to their efforts to have the Eid holiday added to the calendar. So long story short, we had thousands of emails, petitions, phone calls. We collected a whole bunch of letters that we delivered to the Board of Education. And what they essentially did was they were treating the Muslim community unfairly. They were imposing demands on them that they hadn't placed on any other faith community to prove that they were worth being treated equally and fairly to their Jewish and Christian friends and classmates. And so last Tuesday, November 11th, the Board of Education had a hearing to vote on the calendar for 2015-2016. And in 2015, schools were going to be closed on the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, September 23rd. And so our request was that the Board of Education also acknowledge that schools would be closed for the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, which is expected to land on the same day. And we didn't think that there was going to be a lot of opposition. We thought that, oh, this is going to be pretty easy. Schools are already closed. You know, Montgomery County seems to be a pretty diverse state, county. And we didn't think it was going to be a problem. We had friends from our Jewish and Christian communities who were also there testifying for this measure on our behalf. And instead, what the Board of Education did was they did the complete opposite, and instead of adding the Eid holiday to the calendar, despite numerous testimonies, they they went and they removed all the religious references to the Jewish and the Christian holidays from the calendar as well. And I think what this case really highlighted was that this is the length that the Board of Education would go to deny equal treatment for the Muslim students. They would rather take away the religious references to for the Jewish and the Christian holidays rather than add the Muslim holiday to the calendar. Schools would still be closed on those dates, but it's just that the calendar would no longer say the schools are closed for Christmas. It would say that they're closed for winter break. And for us, that was incredibly eye-opening. I mean, we walked out of there and the hearing was packed. We had a lot of folks from the community who were there at that hearing. People had taken off work. And a lot of people were really disappointed, but then something strange happened. We started getting calls from CNN, from Fox, from MSNBC, from New York Times, Washington Post. The media just formed down, and they covered this story. And alhamdulillah, we got so much media attention on the story. And the Board of Education really had to deal with a lot of backlash from not just the Muslim community, but also from the Jewish and the Christian communities who were upset that they took this measure. But their decision really kind of plays into how not having a positive perception of Islam and Muslims can impact Muslims in the sense that they don't have equal accommodation. So how do we fix this? How can we improve the perception of Islam and Muslims? I'm going to ask a quick question. So a recent poll indicated that a lot of Americans have never met a Muslim before. Does anybody want to guess what percentage of Americans have never met a Muslim before?
25%. 30.
No.
30. 90. 50.
I hear some close guesses in there. 60% of Americans have never met a Muslim before. 60%. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. 60%. That means 6 out of 10 people that you meet who are not Muslim most likely have not met a Muslim before. So where are they getting their information about Islam and Muslims from? Fox. Hollywood, pop culture, references to different, stereotypes that Muslims unfortunately have been subjected to. So this is really eye-opening to me, especially, but something that I communicate whenever I talk on this topic with anybody, because I think it's so important for Muslims especially to realize the task that lays ahead of us, the job that we have in bridging that divide between our communities and the non-Muslim communities who've never met a Muslim in real life. So how can we change that? How can we make sure that the perception of Islam and Muslims is accurate? Does anybody have any ideas? No ideas? Brother Ahmed?
For me, it's a personal experience. You have to go out and be contact with each person that you meet. We leave that lasting impression that you care about them and they feel like they're cared for. Just through even a simple conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other suggestions? How can we change that dynamic? How can we get that 60% down to 0%? How can we make sure that there isn't a single person in America who's never met a Muslim before?
I'm not a Muslim, but I think one way you could do it is by instructing people that their idea of what makes a Muslim is not the same thing as a Muslim. I think many of those people who don't think they're a Muslim probably have, but it doesn't match their stereotypes.
Challenging the stereotypes that people have, or whatever notions that they might have about who Muslims are or what they believe. Excellent point. Anybody else want to venture a guess? How else? How can we get that number of 60% down to 0%? Absolutely, and that's so important. And I know for a lot of folks who are Muslim, I know sometimes for me, myself, it's a burden to always be on my best behavior. When I go out, it's like you hear hip-hop and you want to bob your head and you're like, wait, no, I'm a hijabi. There's a certain image that you want to portray. So it's really important that we be cognizant of the fact that whenever we're out in public especially, that we don't want to feed into some of the negative stereotypes that are out there. Like there's one stereotype that, Muslims are always angry. Like they get angry at everything and they're always yelling and screaming. So if you're at the convenience store with your little brother or sister and they're being a nuisance and you start yelling at them and you're a visible Muslim, then people are going to reinforce that stereotype and say, oh, look, she's like behaving like that because she's Muslim. And unfortunately, it's a reality. It's not fair because it puts a lot of pressure on us as individuals to conduct ourselves in a certain way. But it's important to also make sure that we understand where they're coming from and how they've developed these stereotypes as well. Some other things that we can do is organize and participate in interfaith activities. So here on campus, maybe the MSA could reach out to other religious groups on campus and have like a barbecue or like like different events that you can both engage in. Community outreach, like in your neighborhoods, if you have different organizations, civic organizations who are active, who conduct like different kind of food drives around the holidays, or they conduct like clothing drives for the homeless. Make sure that you do what you can to participate. If you can't volunteer your time, then help promote their initiative through word of mouth or through your contacts. And just volunteer your time and your resources to different charities. One thing that I think is really key is that, and it's not always easy to do, especially if you're an introvert and you don't like to talk to strangers or answer questions, is that a lot of times people are really curious. They don't want to be rude and they don't want to offend you, but they have questions. And so if somebody asks you a question like, sister, why are you wearing that hijab? Or not sister, they wouldn't say sister, but if they ask you, why are you wearing that hijab? Or why are you dressed a certain way? Like, to not get offended, but try to just answer the question as matter-of-factly as possible and smile. Smile is charity and is dawah as well. And it leaves the other person feeling that, oh wow, this is something that, I don't necessarily expect Muslims to be happy and pleasant. And that's something that we can help to change that stereotype. But those are just some suggestions to help decrease that number of 60% to 0%. I mean, for me, I'm flabbergasted that we're in 2014 in the United States and there's still such a large number of folks who still have never met a Muslim before. But the most important thing that we can do is not do anything. We have to do something, whatever it is, however much we can do in our own individual capacities. It's important that we do something. Isolating ourselves out of discomfort and fear, it doesn't help change the narrative, and it actually reinforces it. Because it's easy to dislike somebody or dislike something that you're not familiar with. But once you become accustomed to somebody or accustomed to something, then it becomes less strange. It becomes more easily relatable for you. At the end of the day, the question I think that we really have to ask ourselves is, what do we gain? Like, how do we benefit from changing this perception of Islam and Muslims? And I think I went over my time, so I'm just going to quickly wrap up here. And that's the most important question, because if we understand what we stand to benefit by helping to correct a lot of the perceptions out there, then that's something that's going to automatically help motivate us to work to our best ability to make sure that we correct those perceptions. And with that, I will wrap it up. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair to Sister Zainab. So, inshallah, the next speaker who I'd like to introduce is someone who's very close with me, alhamdulillah now. He is my teacher, Imam Mikaeel Ahmed Smith, and he currently serves as the resident scholar at the Islamic Society of Annapolis, as well as the Islamic Society of Baltimore. He grew up in a deeply spiritual Christian home in Buffalo, New York, and at the age of 18, mashallah, he embraced Islam after reading the Quran and the autobiography of Brother Malcolm X. Within a year after his Shahada, Imam Mikaeel enrolled at the Darul Uloom al-Madaniya in Buffalo, New York, where he learned to read Arabic and memorize the Quran. In 2008, he traveled overseas to study Arabic at the Jamia Abu Nur in Damascus, Syria, and upon his return, he continued studying the Islamic sciences at the Darul Uloom al-Madaniya, where he completed the Alim program and earned his bachelor's degree in Islamic studies in 2010. And then finally, in 2012, mashallah, he completed his studies in the Sihah Sitta, the 6 most authentic collections of the prophetic traditions, and Quranic tafsir, earning his master's in Islamic studies at the Darul Uloom Canada in Chatham, Ontario. And later that same year, he moved to Maryland to become the resident scholar at the Islamic Society of Annapolis. And right now, he teaches Tajweed in the foundational Islamic sciences at the Mikaeel Learning Center in Gambles, and serves as a full-time instructor, which is, for me, alhamdulillah, at the Al-Rahma Seminary in Baltimore, Maryland. Imam Mikaeel is passionate about meeting the needs of Muslim converts, building Islamic literacy among youth, and striving for social justice, as well as teaching everybody here about the image of Islam. And inshallah, Imam Mikaeel Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello to everyone. That was a nice long introduction. I could take that phone call. This topic is an amazing topic. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. This topic is an interesting topic, and when Brother Ahmed was organizing this event, he asked what topic we should talk about, and in my mind there was no better topic than the image of Islam. And especially in light of what has happened in the last few days, our brother Abdurrahman has been murdered, killed by that horrible group ISIS, and a Muslim. And when these things happen, we have to look inside ourselves and ask these questions. What is this image of Islam that is being portrayed? One of my teachers I was just speaking to made a very good point, and I'm going to share with you. When I was a young kid, I loved football. I still kind of like it. Don't like the Ravens. Please don't hate me now. I see all of the purple, and I just realized. Okay, but I'm from Buffalo. I think we got like 4 feet of snow a few days ago. 6. Alhamdulillah, I'm in Maryland. I love football. And when I was a kid watching football, every now and then, even in soccer, they still do it. You see this one knucklehead, with no shirt on. He looks really rough. He'd run on the field, and the camera would catch him, and it'd be interesting. Those same things happen nowadays. But now the camera doesn't focus on those people. Right away, the camera switches. So you don't see that. The same thing is happening. Same game, same shenanigans, same thing happening. But the camera doesn't focus on it. And that's something I want to talk about today, is where's the camera focusing? Now, as he explained, I'm a convert to Islam. And before I was Muslim, I was black. Still am. Haven't lost that. I can speak Urdu and Arabic, but I'm still black. Okay? But the reason I say that is because, brothers and sisters, you're not the first minority to walk in this country. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. People have already went through what you've went through. And what I specifically want to talk about today, there's a professor in Berkeley University, his name is George Lakoff. He wrote a book called Don't Think of an Elephant. His name is George Lakoff. He wrote a book called Don't Think of an Elephant. Now, if I say don't think of an elephant, what did you all just do? You thought of a big elephant, right? Well, if I say bacon and eggs, what do you think about? First thing, hottest. He's over there. What do you think about?
Breakfast.
Breakfast. Well, I want to ask you, where did you get the connection between bacon and eggs and breakfast that automatically jumps in your head? Well, there was a company that wanted to make business off of a product they sold. So they hired a very good marketer who happened to be the same one who spread propaganda for Hitler, believe it or not. And he marketed this product, and now all of America thinks of bacon and eggs as their breakfast. Do the research on it, you'll see. So I want to really briefly do something I normally don't do. I'm an Imam. We don't do PowerPoint presentations and all that stuff. That's not our style normally. But I really want to show you something, that you're not the first group to have this done to them. And George Lakoff in this book, he explains that what happens is an image is built around frames. An image is built around frames. And frames are over and over and over and over again reinforced until a particular word makes you think of a particular thing. And this has happened for many years in our society, and I'm going to give you a few examples of that momentarily. Now, the problem with frame building done by media in different outlets is that, as one professor says, she says we are cognitive misers. People are very lazy mentally. And the reason why frames work is because it gives you a very quick and easy way to judge anything you see. You see a black person, you come up with an idea right away. Now, there were years, I grew up in the 90s, where a certain image was put around African Americans. In the 80s, it was a different image. There are different things that, when you hear of a blonde, what's the first thing you think of? Someone built that image. That when you think of a blonde, the first thing you think of is, yeah, maybe like airhead or something like that. No offense. No offense. The point I want to highlight here is that these frames have been built for different segments of society, for different purposes. And we're not the first ones, but the reasons why it's so bad is because we become very, as this one professor says, cognitive misers. We become very lazy. And we love those easy ways of putting everyone in their nice little box. And people feed off that. They feed off that. So what I'm going to show you right now is how different images, and every image you're going to see right now is something that was either a book or something in the front of a newspaper. It was some sort of media. But we're going to go through different segments of American history to see if history is repeating itself. As one great thinker once said, know your history because history is bound to repeat itself. So I'm going to give you a few different groups of people. If we can start the first image. Native Americans, go back really quick. The negative imagery of Native Americans. Where there was a time when we needed to conquer this country. Someone needed it for some profitable reason. But there was someone here before them. So they had to take it. But you can't just take it because those are human beings. There's children, little babies, women, weak. So what do? First image. Oh, wow. Look at that soldier on the ground. Look at the knife in his hand. You can almost take this and verbatim use this for something we see today. And he scalped him. What a horrible image. Can we see the next one? Wow. What is he taking away? Is he snatching innocence? Is he snatching a child? Isn't she scared? Now the thing, when you see this image, you right away affiliate yourself with someone. Are you that guy or are you her? Are you going to be a victim? Or are we going to stop this type of people? Ask yourself, was every Native American like this? And if they were they defending their land? Questions need to be asked. Let's look at the next image. Similarly, fear. This one really caught my eye. Because it's not only an image of Native Americans, and you see the woman who may be unconscious or dead, the innocence there, the fear in the eyes of the other woman, the height of the man who looks almost demonic, somewhat, and the dark features. Look at those Native Americans, man. Those guys were horrible people, man. Can we see another image? Sorry. Wow. They're really dark. Dark represents somewhat of evilness. He's holding an innocent baby up in the air. There's a soldier just pushing away somewhat. Look at the imagery. All of these images I just put before you were in some type of media outlet at a time when Native Americans and they were being persecuted and maybe defending their land. Go forward. Again. Innocence. Being scalped. Being hurt. Barbaric people with no clothes on. Backward people. These images speak enough. I don't need to speak with all of them. I just want to put them in front of you. Keep going to the next image. Next one. Now, wait, don't go forward. I want to see a nice Indian now. A nice Native American. What are they going to look like? Can someone give me an idea now? We're going to give a good, beautiful picture, a positive image, to reinforce a positive frame. Because as I said, these frames are either reinforced. Yes, can you tell me what the next image will look like? Close. Go to the next image. Oh my goodness. Wow. The Native Americans are handing over their young. And look how he's changed. Now this is a good Native American. And we're happy to accept him in. And we are the good Native Americans handing him over to you. This is a good Native American. I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I'm just showing you images that were painted in our American history. Now let's fast forward. You may say, all right, okay, that was a long time ago. We've learned so much. We've educated ourselves. Well, in the last 60 years, 50 years, have we seen any framing of different cultures and people? Can we go forward? Let's think about this. Japanese Americans. How quickly we forget. This was in a newspaper. Can you imagine if you're someone who's Japanese? Brothers and sisters, the reason why I want to connect this issue to different segments of society is because as an African American, I couldn't change that in the 90s. I couldn't hide my race. This Japanese person can't hide who he is. All the Japanese Americans. Now the problem is, watch what happens as the images are reinforced. Let's analyze this one really quick. Keep this horror from your home. Like, this is like Fox big time. Like, they could use this one. Really. Look at the innocence in her face. Her mouth partly covered up. Look at the evil in his face. Go to the next image, please. This one speaks volumes. Because in the corner it says, this is the enemy. Stealing innocence away. A naked woman who looks like an American, presumably. Behind him is hanging bodies with fire. Presumably those are American soldiers or something. And look how evil the Japanese person looks. What I want you to realize in this presentation is how frames are used and reinforced over and over again, so that automatically when a word is said, it automatically brings up another picture in your head. And once we understand how it's been used over and over again with different societies and different classes of people, we can see how to combat that in a positive way. Go to the next one, please. What are you going to do? This many Yanks were killed. Stay on the job until every murdering Jap is wiped out. Now, I'm sure if mainstream media could use this type of these words, they would. But this was mainstream media painting a picture. We all know the outcome. And this is the scary part. It's really not funny. Because the problem is, once these things are reinforced over and over and again, and as Sister Zainab spoke about Fear in Court, if you Google it, Fear Inc., and look at how much money is being spent, it's $150 million direct, more than $1 billion indirect funding to paint an evil picture of Islam. The scary part is what's going to happen next. Can we go a few slides? This is what happened. This is what happened. What does it say? Japs, keep it moving. This is a white man's neighborhood. No Japs allowed. This is what it leads to. See, when these frames are reinforced enough, when these ideas are pushed enough, people, it builds fear. It builds fear. And this is what's dangerous. This woman has been fed an image so many times, that now every Jap is those pictures she's been seeing. This isn't the end of it. What's next? What's next? And we see this in Muslim communities, don't we? Do we not see this in Muslim communities? No Muslims wanted here. Why am I showing you this? Because history in America repeats itself. You're not the first minority. I'm one of you. I'm a Muslim too. You're not the trailblazers. The trail's been blazed. just follow in the footsteps of our predecessors who have worked for civil rights and destroyed these frames of references. Because we're going to talk about how you get rid of a frame of reference. How do you get rid of it? How do you take it out? We're going to talk about that momentarily. Let's just get through a few more of these images. It doesn't stop here. If the frames are reinforced enough, what happens? Do you know what this is? Can someone tell me what this is? Hadis, what is this?
It's in order for all people who are Japanese to go to the internment camps.
Internment? Nice word. You got framed. Can you use another word, Hassan? Concentration. What was different in the other part of the world? It's the same type of camp. But we're going to talk about how language is used in framing an image. Very nicely, he said a very beautiful word. What was the word again? Oh, I want to go there. I want to go there, man. That sounds cool. I want to go to a concentration camp. What's the difference? Nothing. And we're going to talk about how language is used and how many times we reinforce the frame by their language we use. We'll get there in a moment, inshallah. Go forward. Yep. TSA. Same thing. History repeating itself. Keep going. Oh, wow. This is what our American citizens were seeing. In where? San Francisco. Chamber of Commerce. Everyone be quiet. Don't talk about what's going on because the Japanese people are listening to you. Fear. No one talk about what we're doing to the Japanese. Everyone be quiet because every Japanese person is listening to the big plan. Stay quiet. Don't talk. Don't talk. You should be thinking in your mind how we can fight these stereotypes and these frames that are being reinforced. Go to the next one. Next one. This is what's scary. Hadis, what is this? No. This is worse than a concentration camp, buddy. Can someone tell me what this is? Yes, Hiroshima. Exactly. When the frame is enforced enough, when over and over again that frame is reinforced, this is what could possibly happen. Thousands, millions of people wiped out, and we don't think twice about it. Because those people are evil. What is the image of Islam? This small but noble gathering we're in now is important that we leave here in a proactive, positive way. How will we get rid of those images? How will we reform those frames? How will we reform and create new frames? We're going to talk about that in a few moments, inshallah. Next. We're not done. This is just one more enemy that we created. Communism. This was just 2 frames on this, the images that were created around communism. Next one. This is tomorrow. Building fear. Sister Zainab will tell us, and she has explained how much money is being built on building fear. Fear is the primary weapon. Once they are afraid of something, people are willing to sacrifice so much. But those frames that are being built through fear are the very frames that we have to talk about in a few moments on how to change those. Next. And a knife through America. America's mortal enemy. We all know that if you just put Islam at the top of there, that would fit perfectly today with many of the outlets of media today. This is Fox News of today. My point, and that's the end of the PowerPoint presentation, my point here was to show you, as George Lakoff writes in his book, Don't Think of an Elephant, my intention here was to show you how we are not the first ones who different images have been created of. And the creation of those images is through frame building. And let me really briefly, but elementary, tell you about how these frames are built. Common sense. But once we go to the fundamentals of it, we can discuss how to fight against those. The frame is built by constantly connecting a word with a particular picture or idea. So one picture is constantly used with a particular idea, so much so that subconsciously when you hear that word, bacon and eggs, breakfast. And if I say I eat bacon and eggs for dinner, you're going to say, you're crazy. Haram. Pagal ho. There's my earth. I got the daisies. Got it. Majnoon. No Arabs here. The point that this is something very important. We often feel that by presenting the facts, you can fight the frame. It's a misconception. Completely wrong. George Lakoff in this book, he writes, when a frame is built strong enough, facts don't affect it. Facts come in one ear, go out the other ear. This is huge because many of us think, I'll just tell the facts. I'll just go on Fox News and tell the truth. I am not a terrorist. They say, you know when Richard Nixon really proved that he was guilty? When he went on and what did he say? I am not a crook. Why? Can someone explain why based on frame building? I'll give you an example. Don't think of an elephant. What happened? You thought of an elephant. When you use the language of those who are building negative frames and imagery of Islam, when you use that language, you enforce the frame. When you use that language, you enforce the frame. I am not a terrorist. Yeah, he's a terrorist. Yep. Subconsciously. We have to change the discussion. We have to change the discussion. We have to change the vocabulary and the words that are being used to describe Islam. We have to change the words that are being used to describe hijab. We have to change the words, and that will begin to change the frames. But by using the same language of the frames, we enforce those same ideas. We are not fighting against it. It's like yelling at everyone, don't think of an elephant. They automatically will think of it. Another way we have to fight it, which was briefly touched upon, is interacting with people and being an active role model of good Islam. That's a shocking number, 65%. But one of the brothers here, he said something beautiful. He said, I guarantee 65, more than that, have actually dealt with a Muslim, but they didn't know they were dealing with a Muslim. They didn't know they were dealing with a Muslim. So what that means is we have to engage the society, we have to engage our environment, we have to engage the classroom as a Muslim. From the platform of a Muslim. And when you engage it in that way, you're directly going against that frame that has been built. We have to really, really be vigilant about this. And it's not something to take lightly. Inshallah ta'ala, we can discuss, and we're hoping that Sister Zainab, who is a veteran and really a freedom fighter, she's wallahi a freedom fighter for us. And for all those who are coming after us, just as Martin Luther King and all of these people had to literally fight and go to jail for the freedoms of African Americans, now there's a new black man, so to speak. There's a new one. And it's all those. But you know what's funny? A black person can't, walk out the house and say, I'm not going to look black today. He's forced to engage the environment as African American. The Japanese were forced to engage the environment as Japanese. They couldn't change their physical features. We, on the other hand, can engage, and no one will know that I'm Muhammad. I'm just Mike. No one will know that I'm Fatima. I'm just whatever. I couldn't think of another name that would. Huh? I'm not going to say that. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is the importance of engaging the environment as a Muslim. Because when you engage the environment, look at me. My name is, and I normally don't write that. First of all, Sheikh, whatever. But my name is Michael Smith. That's my name. That right there. Hi, my name is Michael Smith. Imam, Imam who? What? Breaking down a frame. Breaking down a frame. See, frames are broken by these type of wake-up calls. And when someone sees you praying in the open, oh, he's a Muslim too? Oh, that guy's cool, man. Oh, she's a Muslim? Oh, I know her. She's chill. You've become the one breaking the frame. So we have to engage the environment, whatever environment we're in, from the platform of a Muslim. From the platform of a Muslim. And this is something that I feel is extremely important nowadays. Of course, we see what it could lead to. We saw what it led to in other societies, and we have hope. Why? We have hope because our country is built. It's been built by freedom fighters and people who always fought for their freedom. Now, what do? Who do we really need? You know who we really need? When Martin Luther King was fighting for the rights of African Americans, there was a moderate group of white Americans who stood by his side. They become advocates for you. These are the ones we want to win over. You can't win everyone over. There's Ku Klux Klan till today. They're still there. They fight for their own rights to exist. Which is kind of interesting. You can't win everyone over. But the moderates of society, those who wish to understand, those who wish to know, we can win them over. And we have to win them over. And they will be the ones standing up for Islam. They will be the ones saying, no, we want Christmas in the holiday calendar, and we want Eid. We've seen examples of the majorities coming to the side of the minorities in American history. We can see it again. But we have to win them over. And how do we win them over? We change the frames. And some of the ways we change the frames are, number one, not using the language of the frame, because you only reinforce it. Number two, engaging the society from the platform of a Muslim, because that automatically will negate the frame. These are some of the things that I came up with on how to battle this war for hate. As Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayah says, we need to wage war on war. Like, my dad taught me, ever since John Wayne, America's been killing stuff. If you know America, you know what I'm talking about. And when we hate something, we wage war on it. It's a society of war sometimes, and we want to get away from that. Islam is built on peace. It doesn't mean peace, it's built on peace. And we need to teach that. So, inshallah, I have great hope for our society. I have great hope for our country. I have great hope, great hope. The image of Islam. Now that brings us to the question, what is the image of Islam? There is no one image of Islam. Islam looks different in every part of the world. Islam looks different everywhere it goes. But there is a distorted image of Islam being portrayed, and that is what we need to be very active and conscious about changing in a positive way. These are just some ideas that this Miskeen thought of. I hope that it is a cause for some change in all of us. And I ask Allah to guide us all and make it easy. And I ask Allah to increase Sister Zainab in her efforts. Wallahi, she is a role model for many of our sisters and brothers. You know, mashallah, she is definitely standing out in the front lines for me and you. And that's not anything to take lightly. I mean, all the sisters need to just go and kiss her hand, because she is literally fighting sisters. Because she is literally fighting for your rights. She is fighting for your rights. And I want to say here, thank you for your efforts. I mean, I see everything on Facebook. I see everything. You know, I don't have time to say Jazakallah all the time, but Jazakallah khair for all your work. Now, all of us here, Muslim and non-Muslims, we have a role to do. If you're non-Muslim, you have a role. You can either be like on one side of the civil rights movement, or you could be one of those people standing next to Martin Luther King and have your picture there forever, right? You can be where you want to. You can choose where you want to be. And we need you in this battle, because you see what it can lead to. nations have been wiped out by the imagery that has been drawn upon them, and we hope and we pray that things turn around for us. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. I know everyone's waiting for food, and so I'm going to stop now, inshallah. Q&A. Okay, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. MashaAllah, I think that was really informative, and it was absolutely a treat for us. We are going to have a quick Q&A session, inshallah. Before that, let me mention a couple things, especially because people are probably getting hungry at this point. There are appetizers on the right side of the room, so if you are feeling a little peckish, go ahead and get some food, inshallah. Additionally, for food service, they will be putting cards on the table. Please fill out with the table accordingly to what you would like, and they will bring it to you.
If you guys could put down what you guys would like.
One last thing to mention also.
There's a list and you can just put
if you are graduating next month, inshallah, and you're interested in wearing a green and gold MSA cord, if you're interested in wearing a green and gold MSA cord for those who are graduating, inshallah, email UMBC MSA or contact Afia as soon as possible, inshallah, to get that squared away. So we're going to begin the Q&A, inshallah, and you can have a little bit of silence, please, so we can hear our speakers as well as the questions. There are notepads on the table. Actually, I'm sorry, we're going to have a 2-minute break until I get started.
Can you check your mics for this?
Hello?
Ready? Bismillah, alhamdulillah, inshallah, we're going to go ahead and get started on the Q&A. If you have any questions, we have people with microphones who can bring it over to you, inshallah, you can ask your question. We also have these note cards on the table, I believe they're sticky notes. Anybody has a question they want to ask anonymously, anything of the sort, please feel free to write on there. Someone will come by and collect it and bring it up to the speakers, inshallah. There's a box going around where you can collect that. I'm going to go ahead and start, actually, with a question of my own, just to kind of get the ball rolling, inshallah. So, Sheikh Mikaeel, I wanted to ask you if you could just, maybe some people weren't here or something, if you could just define what framing really is and what its effects can be.
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yeah, I think I went a little quick into that. What actually is framing? George Lakoff has 2 books on this topic. One is Don't Think of an Elephant, which is more geared towards the Republican-Democratic debate on different political issues. He briefly touches upon it in that book, but in another book he wrote, which is more academic, he speaks directly on this concept of framing images and ideas. And what it is, as we briefly spoke about before, is that a certain word or terminology, see, obviously all words have meaning, we all know that. But the meaning is something cognitive inside. You can't see it, you can't really hear it. It's something that, a chain of thoughts in your mind. So again, when I say bacon and eggs, automatically there's a chain in your mind that says breakfast. Now the concept is building that chain. How do you build a chain between one concept and an idea? So what we see happening today is Islam, with negativity. So the first thing a person will unconsciously and subconsciously and not even involuntary, the thing that will come up to the layman who has no interaction with Islam, will be that Islam is something negative. And now what's happened worse is media has chosen to call these barbarians by what they want to be called, which is Islamic State. So now, just the word Islamic State being a headline is constantly being reinforced with negativity. And hence, what I told you is there are other civil rights groups that had to break down frames. What was the terminology used in the 1930s for a black man? Negro, boy, right? What was one of the very first things, and boy went on for a long time. What was the very first thing that the civil rights movement did? Change the language. You can't call us Negro anymore, or colored, or boy. Because once the frame is built already, you can't destroy that. You have to rebuild a new frame. You can't change boy, call me boy, but think of a good thing now. No, don't call us boy anymore. Don't call us Negroes anymore. Because the word Negro is affiliated with something negative and derogatory that you've built over centuries. We don't want that term anymore for us anymore. So this is very important, and this is what framing is. It's connecting an idea with a word in a very simple way. And again, I highly recommend this book by George Lakoff, professor at Berkeley University, Don't Think of an Elephant.
Anyone else down in Chaudry have a question? So I can get ready to go into this. Done, you know.
So I have a question for Sister Zainab. We had an open spaces discussion this evening at 12, and one of the things that was brought up was we should get more involved in politics to spread Islam, to spread the image of Islam. And I was wondering, as someone that works for a political organization, how would you suggest to people that don't have the time to do internships and such, how can we get involved minutely in politics in a college environment?
That's a really good question. I remember when I was in college myself, you barely have time to keep up with your exams and your quizzes and all the other stuff that's going on. First of all, I want to begin by why I think it's so important for Muslims to get involved in politics. And part of the reason is because, so I'll give you, for example, the state of Maryland. Maryland is one of the most diverse states in the country. We have 141 state delegates. We have 47 state senators. And we only now voted into office our first Muslim delegate. So basically, we have folks in Annapolis, who are speaking on our behalf, who are making decisions that affect our communities on the local level and on the state level, but we don't have anybody who's necessarily speaking on our community's behalf. So it's so important to have folks in Annapolis especially, or even on a county level, even if you begin small, even if you begin like in your own county, Ballroom County, Howard County, Carroll County, wherever you live. Start off in local politics and go from there, but it's so important to get involved. One of the things that CARE does is we offer internships, and like you mentioned, it's true when you're in college, you don't really have that opportunity to get involved. If you don't have a lot of time, then that makes it challenging because you have to invest time and energy. Politics is one of those things that it's really nuanced, and a lot of it is based on making connections, having face-to-face time with your elected officials, making trips to Annapolis. But even if you don't have time to do that, familiarizing yourself with the process, it goes a long way. Like if you can learn up on the Maryland General Assembly, for example, and learn more about what the process is to, pass a bill into law behind the scenes, and then inshallah, when you do graduate from college, or if you are interested in politics and you're majoring in a major that, or if you have a major that's going to allow you to go in that direction, like political science or depending on what your interests are, then once you graduate, then you can devote more time and energy towards figuring out exactly how you want to become involved. But yeah, it's challenging when you're in college. I remember when I was in college, I hardly ever had time to do anything because your studies, especially your course load, it takes up the bulk of your attention.
I have a question that was sent up for Sheikh Mikaeel. They wanted to know, and I guess this definitely can relate to the image of Islam, who or what influenced you towards Islam?
I was just giving that short story to Sister Zainab right now. It actually directly ties in with this message of the image of Islam. Through my whole, I went to a Catholic high school in in Western New York. And my best friend was the only other minority in my class, basically. His name was Saeed Mubarak. Saeed Mubarak. I'll just tell you one thing. Saeed Mubarak had amazing character. His manners and things were just absolutely amazing. But he had nothing to do with music except Islam. Nothing. Why? It ties directly into what we were speaking about, which is never once did it cross my mind that he had such good characteristics and things because his religion taught it to him. Never once did it cross my mind that he was that way because of his religion. We assume that I'll just be nice and people will think Islam is good because I'm being nice. No. You're just another nice human being like everyone else. If you wish to portray Islam as a religion that teaches you this quality, sometimes you have to literally say it. That, Islam taught me to do this for you. Islam teaches this. You have to set that stage. So how did I accept Islam? Someone gave me a book, the Holy Quran. And I read it one time, and in English, and it just pulled me in right away. I studied the Bible for many years, very devout Christian, but the way the Quran speaks is very different from the Quran. And anyone that has been through Christianity or is familiar with the Bible can immediately attest to the method of speaking and the mode of addressing the audience in the Quran and the Bible is completely different. And that was something that, in a short story, that was what brought me to Islam. I just read the Quran. And I never knew any Muslim before.
Alhamdulillah. So, gentlemen, rather to take, I have some questions here, but I wanted to take some questions from the audience. If anybody has anything they want to bring up to our speakers, inshallah. We have one.
Assalamu my question is for Imam Mikaeel. It's a little bit.
Where is this brother? Oh, son.
My question is, in terms of trying to define when it's okay as a Muslim to take the easier path and following your nafs. For example, like, some people disagree with it, but Imam Shoaib Webb, when he was saying that there's 5 rules to wipe over, like in the Maliki method, so when to wipe over your socks or whatever. But he was saying that for Muslims living in America, there are certain things that you can do. You can take the easier path because it brings you closer to the culture of the people in the place you're living. So when is that acceptable in opposition to following your nafs? In the other example is like eating zabiyah or non-zabiyah.
This, just due to the nature of the question, I don't think it has to do too much with the topic at hand. So if you want, I'll discuss this with you after, inshallah, because it's a somewhat detailed question. There is one aspect of the question which does directly connect with this issue, which is the culture, American culture, and Islam. And I noticed a lot of second or third generation Muslims, they have this dilemma of identifying themselves. What do they identify with? And how do they show that identification? Islam, the way I understand it, is a religion that is universal. It has went to every corner of the globe, somewhat literally. And you've seen interpretations of Islam and the bringing out of that Islam in different lights. Every culture that brought in Islam showed it in a different form and in a different light. And that's the beauty of Islam. I think it becomes really bad when we become restrictive and we say it has to be one way. And this is what we see in the right wing of American society, and this is what we see with extremists in Islamic society. That it has to be one way or the highway. This is the only interpretation of Islam, and that is what has to be accepted. And likewise, we see the same thing with the right wing, that American has to look like this. American has to be like this. One of my good friends, Hassan Shibley, he was on one of the, I think it was what's her name? Megyn Kelly's show. And she started to literally attack him because of certain actions he does as a Muslim. So I said to him, and he tweeted it later, and it ended up on Fox News. I said, you should have told her, Megyn, you are becoming the ISIS of America. How? You're dictating what the society should be like and what it is to be and not be American. America has always had different types of people, and that is the beauty of our country. We have to celebrate that difference. We have to celebrate that difference.
I think there's also two key points that's important to keep in mind. First of all, that Islam is a religion that was sent as a mercy. The Prophet was sent as a mercy to mankind. Islam is not meant to be difficult. I think sometimes a lot of people, they get turned off by Islam because they think that it's a lot more difficult and challenging than they would be comfortable practicing. And I think there are several hadiths that point to the fact that if you find yourself being turned away from Islam because it's too challenging, that it's not something that you should, immediately turn away from it. I'm not a religious scholar, so I'm not, putting myself in that position. But I think it's important to keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that Islam emphasizes the middle of that path. So instead of having, taking sides of either extreme, it's important to keep in mind that the middle path, the moderate path, is actually what Islam emphasizes.
Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to have, raise your hand, bring up a question? I have some here, inshallah, as well.
This manner of extremism was seen in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, and right immediately after the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It was this type of extreme form of Islam that many of the great leaders and Sahaba, companions of the Prophet, were assassinated by these same type of people that celebrated and had a very extreme view of Islam. But this is nowhere the majority, or even close to the majority of what the world's Muslims believe and follow. And that's what we want to portray in America. What we want to do is the same way as I began with speaking about that person who runs on the field and does something which is unacceptable. There was a time when the camera would focus on that. But now when that action happens, the camera goes and looks another way. And the reason the camera looks another way is twofold. There's twofold. What is the main thing that happens when you don't give attention to something? You deter a repeat of that thing. You deter other copycat imitations of that offense. And that is one of the reasons why they don't show you those guys that always run on the field and pull those pranks and all these things. So they show you won't get attention if you do these things. Why is it that our media, as they say, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Why is it that our media chooses to highlight the rotten apples of the society and give them the publicity that they want? And they know they're giving them the publicity that they want. When there's 1 million Muslims in the world, billions of Muslims who have done righteous deeds those same days, but we choose to show that one action that some radical did. So we need to, what we want to do, African Americans today, and I'm African American, so I can say it, I feel comfortable. If ignorant or if there are some African Americans doing something which is not acceptable, the majority of people will get upset with media. Why are you portraying this as if this is how most are? They'll stand up against that. We have to stand up the same way. That why are you portraying us in this light? Take the camera off of these people and put the camera on those who give a positive, reinforcing image of Islam. So that's our struggle. We want to resist this reinforcement of a negative image of Islam.
And I have a great, question that's, I think we can make a very quick answer for it. It says, I see all these videos that there are these extremists who claim that when they commit acts of terrorism, this is what Allah says. So my question is there any such verses in the Quran?
I think it really depends on the video, but if you're referring to the kind of video that, for example, ISIS is using as propaganda, I think it's really important to keep in mind that these folks, they are people who have their own personal agendas. They have their own political agendas, and what they're doing is very wrong, but what they're doing is they're using religion to manipulate people, and they're trying to use religion to advance their own political ideologies. And unfortunately, in that region of the world where there are already so many people who are oppressed, who have been suffering through very difficult conditions, it's easier to manipulate that population. And so people easily buy into that because it gives them hope, it gives them something to look forward to. It gives them promise for a better future. And if you've been following any of the media coverage of, not the Fox News or CNN, but media coverage from outlets in the Middle East who are more reputable about this subject and who are more reliable about the subject, what they've been revealing is that a lot of folks who, especially young Muslim youth, who initially were so taken in by the idea of ISIS and this caliphate that they're trying to establish, and this idea that, Muslims are going to rule the world, what they are realizing is that in reality, when they actually, people who travel to that part of the world to join the ranks of ISIS, what they realize is that the reality of the ground is much different. And they go there thinking that it's, this great thing, and, we're going to be a part of this caliphate, we're going to rule the world, and we're going to free Syria, and they have all these ideologies that, they want to be a part of. And they go there and they realize that the reality is completely different. And a lot of people who end up going there, they want to come back home, but of course that's not an option. That's going to be really difficult for them to come back home. So those are the kind of videos that you're referring to. I don't know if I'm off the mark here. Is that what you?
Yeah, I think the.
Can I we're Muslim, we don't piggyback, but let's piggyback here. Can I piggyback on that one, which is any book you take, any holy book, can be very dangerous in the hands of an ignorant person. There were times when the Crusaders were saying, God wills it, and slaughtering cities. Slaughtering cities. This is what we have to fight, is ignorance. And there's ignorance across the globe in different forms, in different ways, but this ignorant, there are Muslims who are ignorant of their religion. There are Muslims who are ignorant of their religion. There are non-Muslims who are uninformed of what Islam is. So what we, and it's amazing, we're in an institution of learning, what we have to be doing is become these beacons of education, enlightenment, for both sides, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslims. But the Quran has verses that speak about codes of war and rules of engagement. But if you take them out of context, you can make them say anything you like them to say.
And just to add on to that, I would just like to point out, I don't know how many people are aware in this room, how many students are aware, but there was one instance where two of the men who went to travel to Syria, one from Great Britain actually, to join the ranks of Syria, later on, intelligence found out that they had actually purchased copies of Islam for Dummies and the Quran for Dummies online prior to traveling to Syria to join ISIS. And I think that this really, it's amusing if it wasn't so sad, that they're using, these kind of books as their source for information about Islam, thinking that they're going to do something noble. And I think it really ties into what Imam Mikaeel was saying, that there's a lot of ignorance about what the true tenets of the faith are. And if you take a verse out of context, and you cherry pick verses from any holy text, and you can twist them to mean whatever you want them to mean, basically. And so it's really important that when you're understanding religion, you do so in keeping that in the back of your mind, that there is nuance when you're studying religion.
And I don't want to, by any means, make religion look to be the bad guy, whether religion be Christianity, or whether religion be Islam. Not that the religion is what is causing death and war, because there have been many secular agendas that have been the cause of many wars. Again, we need to understand that Islam and all these religions are religions of peace, but people whose intentions are corrupt, they'll use anything for to achieve their objective, and that's what we see happening. We can't stop them, but what we can ask and what we can fight for is, again, and what we're here for is to celebrate the image and to talk about reforming the image of Islam. And the way we can reform that is by lobbying, as Sister Zainab does, and by engaging the media and having objections to why these things are being put, engaging our colleagues on the campus, engaging our professors, and showing that this is not the only interpretation of Islam, and that this type of propaganda was used with other minorities in America before, and we're just going to do the same thing again.
Does anybody in the audience who'd like to a hand up, get the microphone. No, just, okay, we got one right there, Sean. We're gonna let him finish chewing, I think.
No, I'm good.
Alright, so, yeah, while, Sheikh, Mikaeel was speaking, you mentioned, frame, the frame, like, words in a frame, so you mentioned, what words we shouldn't use. I was wondering if you could also, like, elaborate on what words we can use instead of words like terrorist and other words.
Yeah, so, and George Lakoff speaks about this. There are think tanks, for both, Democrats or Republicans, that actually, you know, they teach people how, and politicians, how to approach different ideas. Tax relief makes everyone feel good, and they don't even need to look at the details of what this tax relief means, because everyone wants relief. So the wording is what counts. How many think tanks do we have? Do we have any?
Muslims, we don't have any organized think tanks, no, we don't.
Hello?
We
We're
have
all
a
going.
couple, we have a couple research think tanks, ISPU, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, but in terms of lobbying on Capitol Hill, zero.
Zero. What do you expect? This is what, we need the academia and the scholars of language and these things to help in this field. We need Muslim think tanks to help and countering this imagery that we see happening. But directly, there's many ways. If you take Syrian fighters against the Assad regime, depending on who you listen to or when you listen to, they may be called terrorists one month, and the next month they may be called freedom fighters. Same exact people. Same exact people. But freedom fighters, it all sounds nice because the word freedom was used. So we automatically are not, it doesn't bring up a negative frame. Terrorist has been drilled so much now that I don't even know if it's used for a non-Muslim doing an act of violence. I don't even think it's very seldom used out of that frame that has been created. So I don't have one answer to that question. It is a field that other organizations have created think tanks in order to deal with this problem, how to create the vocabulary needed to fix the problem. I don't have the answers to that, but you as potential academia and scholars up and coming, this is maybe a field you may be interested in, and you can come up with those ways to change those frames of reference.
I'm going to take Ahmed, we'll come back to inshallah.
Question. No?
Yeah, we're just going to switch up real quick, so back and forth. Great question here. It says, many Islamophobes make theological arguments in order to perpetuate the distorted image of Islam, i.e. Islam calls for death to apostates, etc. How can you confront these arguments while trying to reframe the image of Islam?
That's a very interesting question, and it's a really important question. And I think it's also important to think about the fact that that's actually how Islamophobes are so effective. Like how they've been able to create, such a significant impact on not just the greater public here in the West, but worldwide, about creating misconceptions about the true image of Islam. And I think it's important that before we begin to rebut their arguments, we educate ourselves first. And it's important to know that if there are Islamophobes who are making a certain argument, that we know how to rebut it accurately and correctly. So for example, one of the questions that I often receive is, well, why is it that, Islam condones violence against certain people? Or why is it that there's a specific verse recently, just as relevant now, with ISIS beheading innocent civilians, aid workers, and journalists from the U.S. and Great Britain? Some people have referred to the verse in the Quran that specifically refers to striking the neck. And they say that the Islamophobes especially have capitalized on this verse to say that this is why Islam condones terrorism, this is why Islam is, barbaric and called all kinds of horrific names. And our response to that is that it's really important to make sure that people aren't cherry-picking verses from holy texts and using that to justify any kind of, barbaric behavior like this. Each verse in the Quran was revealed, and there's context behind it. if we look at the history of Islam and how the Quran was revealed, and I'm not an Islamic scholar or an expert, so I can't, answer this question probably as best as Imam Mikaeel can. But each verse in the Quran, there's a story behind it, and there was a period in time that there were events going on that allowed, that were, the catalyst for this verse to be revealed. And if we isolate a specific verse and say that it's okay to justify a specific action because this is what the verbatim meaning of this verse is, then that's absolutely incorrect. And not only is that misleading, it's just flat out wrong. And so that's one of the arguments that we've been using specifically with Islamophobes who've been using specific verses in the Quran to justify, acts of terrorism, and not even just Islamophobes, but even Muslim extremists who've been using religion to justify their acts. We've been rebutting that argument by saying that you can't isolate any verse from holy text and use that to justify those actions. In the case of ISIS, CARE published a letter last month that was signed by 130 religious scholars and leaders globally around the world, and these were the top religious scholars around the world. And in this letter, we highlighted 24 key points that showed how the actions of ISIS specifically were in direct conflict with the teachings of Islam. And we basically made an enemy out of ISIS, which we're not worried about because that's definitely not one of our concerns. But in this letter, it really was a very nuanced way of deconstructing how they're using Islam to promote their agenda and promote their ideology. So that's one way to
Another thing I want to highlight, I think Sister Zainab said very clearly, very beautifully, and very accurately that everything has a context in which it was revealed, and thus a context in which it refers to. And if you take those verses out of context, you can make the story say whatever you like it to say. And not only that, we have a concept in Islam which is called ijma. There are 4 governing principles in Islam, which is Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas, analogical reasoning. And Ijma means a consensus. And the consensus holds a very strong opinion in Islam. And if you ask 99%, I was in Hajj this year by the mercy of Allah, and I was sitting in the Prophet's mosque. All Muslims know this is like the center of Islam almost. And the Friday sermon was against ISIS. The khutbah, the Friday sermon was against this horrible interpretation of Islam. Now, what more? And I'm like, I wish Fox could see this. Like, I wish people could see. I'm in the Prophet's mosque and and I was there and I was able to talk to a lot of, firsthand, a lot of the youth in Saudi Arabia. And every teenager I spoke to would say these are Khawarij, which is a term referring to a group that had very strong and staunch opinions of Islam that have left the fold of Islam even at the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So if we look at the consensus around the board, around the globe, this is less than 1% of Muslims. Why is the light on them? Why is all the attention on 1% of our society? That doesn't make sense. And we don't do it for anyone else.
There's no fixed
So why are we doing it with Muslims? Focusing on less than 1%.
And that's one thing where framing also comes into play, because that 1% of Muslims who have been categorized as extremists, are we really going to allow them to define or think for us? Or are we going to speak up and say that this is not extremism? We want to take out our religion from that.
No, but like we need a lot more than certain people.
Distorting religion.
Do you want to take care of that? Just
Can
get
I add
someone
one
to
more
go
point? This word terrorist, it has become one of those framed words. It's just a word that's thrown around the way. Communism was thrown around the way. All of these things, as I showed in the PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if any of you are aware of the UAE recent publishing. If Sister Zainab could inform us, she knows more about it than me, but I just want to show you how these words are used and inaccurately. Can you just shed some light on that for us?
So the UAE, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but on Saturday, I believe it was actually, the UAE designated a list of terrorists. They lumped the most notable entities worldwide of religious scholars, Muslim scholars. They lumped groups like Islamic Relief, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. They lumped the Muslim American Society, which is one of the oldest groups, Islamic groups here in the United States, that has been established to be a reputable organization, into the same list of the likes of ISIS and Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and the true terrorist organizations. And nobody was expecting this, and it completely took everybody by surprise. I mean, Fox is having a field day. They're using this to really say, oh, well, you know, these are terrorist organizations. And part of the problem is that we have to be able to make sure that we separate our goals, our missions, and our values from political regimes abroad who aren't in line with our way of thinking. If our work is threatening their regime and their power in that part of the world, then that's going to be a problem. That's something that obviously there's a conflict there. Our preaching democracy and a free society and equal rights for all individuals despite their religion, it's not a concept or a notion that's looked upon favorably in the Middle East, where we have monarchies, we have dictatorships, we have regimes who are in power who don't believe that everybody should be treated equally and fairly. And so when they see that their way of life is being threatened, then they're going to attack organizations that are powerful and that are helping to shape that perception. So that, I think, ties back in with what Mikaeel was saying, that framing is so important because you can use a word and you can frame it in such a way that it can have a completely different meaning when it's applied to two different things.
And actually, just to mention, I saw something earlier today where on C-SPAN, the U.S. Markedly denounced what the UAE had said about CARE, and said they're one of their biggest advocates and helpers. So that's important to take into account as well. Inshallah, Ahmed Nassar, we have a question from you. So someone's going to bring you a mic. If you don't already have one, there you go.
So I guess my question pertains to the whole exposing yourself as a Muslim, and many Americans not really reading Muslims, or they think they haven't been a Muslim. Oh, okay. Or they think they haven't really been a Muslim or anything. Like for me, let's say it's not hard, since I clearly look Arab, so people kind of associate Arab, Muslim. So, and anyone that wears a hijab, it's easy to associate that.
Yeah.
But I know, I've met, sisters, let's say, that don't wear the hijab or something, or brothers that don't necessarily fit the stereotype of Muslim, so they're not brown and all that.
Yeah.
What do you think are good strategies to exposing yourself early on, like to acquaintances? It's easy with friends, because eventually they'll find out. But let's say your first time you're meeting someone, second time, something like that. How do you go about it, especially with you having a name like Michael Smith? It's no one could ever really guess.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that? What are good strategies to not forcing it, making it natural?
You just gotta be. I personally feel you just gotta be social. Obviously, I'm meeting you first time in the elevator. I'm not gonna, sit there and like, by the way, I'm Muslim. I pressed that button because I'm Muslim. No, it doesn't happen like that. I think you have to judge every situation on its own. But definitely, I think it's important to speak about your Islam. Just to couple that with an experience. Again, my friend Saeed Mubarak, I knew he was Muslim. So it wasn't an issue of me not knowing. But that, knowing him as a Muslim, I never ever equated that to the reason or one of the reasons why he had such good character. Why? Because he never made that correlation between them. He never said, my religion taught me this. I learned this because of this. So my mother's not a Muslim. So I'll do something and, Mom, Islam taught me that paradise is under your feet. Or Islam taught me to do this and this and this. So verbally showing and saying that the reason I'm doing this is because my religion taught me to be this way. So I think sometimes just opening our mouths and not being so shy, that is one thing we have to do sometimes. I hope that helped. If Sister Zainab could help me.
I was just going to say, maybe I know it's easier said than done, but if you are comfortable in your own identity as a Muslim, my experience has been that, for the most part, people, even if you don't agree with your way of life or with your thought process or how you believe, if you respect yourself as a Muslim and you're not afraid to carry yourself in a certain way and be a visible Muslim, then, I mean, there might be discrimination and you can't, there's no easy way out of, being accepted all the time everywhere you go. But for the most part, people tend to accept you if you accept yourself. So I think a large part of it comes back to being comfortable in your own identity and what you believe in. And then not being afraid to answer questions. I've had a lot of friends who come up to me and they're like, oh, well, I don't like people asking me about hijab, so that's when I'm going to start wearing it. Or I don't want to, have to deal with the baggage that comes with being, like, identified as a Muslim. So I always tell them, I'm like, part of it comes back to not being afraid to ask questions. If people ask you when you're in the bathroom making wudu and there's water splashing all over the place, and it's one of those awkward scenarios where people who've never seen that before, they might come upon you like, what's going on? You don't have a shower at home. If they ask questions, then being comfortable answering those questions, that you're making ablution, you're going to go pray. I think part of it just comes back to being comfortable answering questions.
So I'm going to take a question from here real quick, inshallah.
I think we kind of need to.
Is it 8 o'clock?
It's around 8 o'clock now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it is
We can
8:10.
take one more question.
Yeah, we'll take, okay, so this question is, and it says, Islam starts at the family level, so what can you suggest for those families who aren't unified at this level before moving on to bettering the image of Islam at the community level?
That's a very important question. We all know the very well-known saying that, if you want to change the world, change yourself. Changing yourself will change your family. After that, you may move to your community, and when you change your community, then you've changed the world. So I think we need to not think so globally all the time. Islam does teach us to focus on our own rectification. Self-rectification is the essence of everything. If we become better Muslims, I mean, how many of us leave our shoes not on the rack when we go to the masjid, right? Or how many of us do ablution, wudu, and we don't clean up after we've done wudu? So first thing is changing ourselves, fixing ourselves, and then our next level of responsibility is our close family members, helping and making changes there. I don't know how that directly ties into our topic on the image of Islam, but just on general levels of responsibility, Islam, and we know the Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessings be upon him, one of the first verses revealed to him was وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, and warn your close family. Scholars write that the reason is this is teaching us the levels of responsibility. One is to first fix yourself. Second is to busy yourself with your close family. Islam is a very, very family-oriented religion. That in itself is da'wah, calling people and giving example of what Islam teaches. Islam does focus on having very close families, having well-knit families, and we see that as a social breakdown and anti-Islamic if families are dysfunctional.
I would just like to add on to that, it's important to keep in mind that Islam is not a monolith, right? Muslims are not a monolith. The Muslim community is very diverse, and it's very inaccurate to say that everybody's going to think the same way, they're going to practice the same way, they're going to feel the same way about different issues. And that trickles down to the family level as well. So, for example, just to give you a personal insight, when I started wearing hijab when I was 19 years old, nobody in my family wore hijab at that time. And I actually faced a lot of resistance from my family about this decision, and a lot of my family members were like, oh, it's not a good idea, you're going to face a lot of difficulties down the road. And it was a struggle. So you're never going to see 100% eye to eye with anybody, but it's something that Imam Mikaeel was saying, that it's going to, with time, you have to be able to develop that level of understanding with the people who are closest to you, so that you can maintain those bonds of kinship, even while not allowing their faith or level of faith to impact or negatively impact your level of faith. It's easier said than done, but it's like a work in progress. It's something that you just have to constantly work at.
One thing I was surprised hasn't come up yet in this discussion of the image of Islam is how we perceive ourselves. Sister Zainab touched upon it about self-confidence and being confident in yourself. how do we see ourselves? How do we see Islam? This is very important too, because the frames that have been set up, sometimes we even think of ourselves through those frames. We look at ourselves at how people view me, how people deem me to be. And this is something that we need to discuss and think about and talk about, is that how have we started to look at our own selves? Have you heard something so much that you yourself now think that about yourself? And if we use other examples of other minorities that have had different stereotypes built around them, we see the same thing, the same effect happening, that even that group begins to deem themselves in that way that the general society looks at them. And this is very dangerous in a level that we don't want to reach, is that when we forget our own identity based on the messages that are over and over reinforced about who we are. This is a subtle point, and I think we don't realize how much there's such an inferiority complex based on the frames built around you. There was a time when African Americans permed their hair. You know what perming your hair is literally? Making it straight. Why though? Because it was looked down upon to have that type of hair. So we want to now, fit in so much that I'll put on this thing that really burns my head, and I'll perm my hair so that now I'm acceptable in the society and I don't look like they, say is a bad image. This is a subtle point, but, are we perming our hair? To use a metaphor, are we perming our hair? And you know what happened after the perming age? Afros. You know afro, right? Well, now I'm happy to show my hair like this. So we see different stages in different minorities, and my intention tonight was to wake up the Muslim youth and say, hey, you're not the first. Read history, and you'll see what you're going through yourself. We are just another group struggling for civil rights, fighting an evil image of us, and it's just, you'll be rewarded. Everyone looks at Malcolm X. Everyone looks at Martin Luther King and says, he did it. Well, today's your day. Today's your turn. Go ahead. Sorry.
I know that we don't have a lot of time left to answer questions, but I just want to let everybody know that if you have any other questions, Brother Ahmed has our contact information. Please, he knows that he can pass it and share it with anybody in the room. Please feel free to call or email or contact us. And inshallah, if there's any way that we can help you handle some of the challenges that you might be facing, inshallah, we'll do our best to help you guys.
Jazakallah khair to our speakers today. She said any questions that were not answered today will be sent, inshallah, to them, that were sent up here, and she will get a response, inshallah. And from here, inshallah, the speakers are going to go ahead and head out, and we are going to have just a bit of a hangout time until 9 o'clock, where we'll pray Isha. Also, just want to give a reminder, inshallah, on December 5th, it's a Friday, after about 2:30, we'll be having the MSA potluck, inshallah, end of semester potluck. So be sure to join us there, inshallah. If you enjoy this event, it'll be just as much fun. And, have a great time with us. So, inshallah, now I'm going to invite Amr Nazir up to please give the adhan. And, inshallah, everybody can just hang out until 9 o'clock. We'll pray in UC 310.
Jazakallah. Thank you for everyone coming. Perfect. We need to do more inshallah. Did you eat food? Did you eat already? Huh? That was awesome. I know. I think people will really accept it, mashallah. Yeah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allah.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله